Hello, everyone. I apologize. We had some technical difficulties getting started, but we're just about to get started.
Hey, I hope can everybody hear me, Anais? Not a good sign. Testing. Okay, everyone can hear
I
me.
can.
Okay.
We're all good now. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
Thanks. All right. I feel like a true grandpa today. So my name's Rick. I've been working at Influx Data for like 3.5 years now. And let me share my screen because we are going to walk through some pretty fun stuff that we've been working on. So I'm going to share my screen, share screen, window. All right. So what I think now is that everybody can see my Visual Studio Code environment where I'm looking at a Jupyter notebook, and I'm going to use this to present and demo. So basically what we're talking about today is this new community library that some of us, like me and Jay, Will Cook, some other folks have contributed to. And the idea here is that we want to make some Python libraries and a CLI built on it that just makes it much easier to use InfluxDB 3.0. And we want something that's easy to contribute to, easy to fork, and do what you need to with, and etc. So to that end, it's up on GitHub, so you can go there and fork the code, log issues, make pull requests, etc. Okay, so now you may be wondering, like, oh, this looks like pretty cool stuff. I'm a Python developer. I use InfluxDB. Where can I use it? Well, there's two places that you can use it today. So one is on InfluxDB serverless. Basically, if you have created an InfluxDB account after January 28th, you are using InfluxDB 3.0. We brand it InfluxDB serverless, and all this software will work there just fine. We also have a new product that we announced last week called InfluxDB Dedicated, which is not custom, but it's a dedicated instance of InfluxDB 3.0 just for your organization. It's single tenant. You can contact our sales team, or just if you want to give Dedicated a try. Okay, so first, I'm going to go through demonstrating the new Python library, and then we'll go and take a look at the CLI. Doubt there'll be any questions, but I welcome any if there are any, and I'll just keep my eyes peeled for the question channel. Okay, so first you can install the client using pip. I've already done that, obviously. But one thing to note about the client is what we're striving for here is just utter simplicity. So we really want the client to focus on just reading and writing. So in terms of like control plane functionality, like creating new databases and creating tokens and etc., we're not sure how we want to incorporate that functionality, but we may not actually want to incorporate that into this library, which is really just focused on ease of use of the data plane. So basically that boils down to it's only got a constructor, a write method, and a read method. So let's take a look. Oh, there's some information here about if you want to contribute. There's a test package that you can run. So if you add tests or make sure things keep working, so follow these instructions if you fork the code or clone the repo so you can make a contribution. Okay, so now let's run some code. So that was all markdown. This is code. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import from the library that I installed the InfluxDB client. So let me just run that, make sure it works. And now what I need to do is instantiate the client using the constructor. And that takes a few things. It needs to know the database, the host, the token, and the org. Just a point of fact, database is what we call the bucket in V1, and what we're calling it's a database again in V3. So if you're a V2 user, or you're using InfluxDB Cloud 2, what you call a bucket, we call a database. It's fine. The backend will make that whole conversion for you. So don't worry about it. Just call it a database. So you give it the host. The key here is that it's not the HTTP endpoint. That can be confusing and that will cause errors. It's just the actual, just pure host name. Then you can give it a token. I hit all this in a config file, so people don't see my token. You give it your org ID, and this active equals true, and this name. This is just some goo to make the CLI work. And so if you're just instantiating the client, you don't need to worry about that. So first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that I'm reading in the config file correctly. And so what I'm just is printing like, yep, that's the host, that's the database, that's the org, and the token is there. So that means I'm reading that incorrectly. And so now all I have to do is instantiate a version of the client. And one thing to note here is that this client is going to work for reads and writes. So if you've used any of our existing clients, they can be pretty complicated because you instantiate the client, then you need like a write API and a read API and maybe some control plane APIs and such. So we're not messing with that. Just create one client, tell it what it needs to know, and then go ahead and write this, run this. And okay, so now I have a client object. I can tell because there were no errors when I tried to create it. So now I'm just going to write just some simple line protocol that I can reuse. So I'm not giving it a timestamp, which means the server will just timestamp it, with the time that it lands on the server. So just creating a measurement called demo measurement. And then I'm just have two fields, F0 and F1. And now I'm going to go ahead and that. Now I have a line, now I have a string object, this line protocol. And now this is all I need to do to write. Oh, by the way, I added this write options are synchronous just because it makes it a little easier when you're debugging and developing, because if you get an error, you get it right away. It's not like a asynchronous callback. So, so going ahead and let's write. All right, looks like the write worked. And now let's query. So remember, I'm using 3.0, which supports SQL. So I'm just going to write a very simple SQL query, select star from demo measurement. Now, in SQL, you may say like, hey, this is a table name, not a measurement. Well, in 3.0, there's no like a measurement and a table are in essence the same thing. So sometimes I'll say table, sometimes I'll say measurement. It's pretty much interchangeable for our purposes. So I'm just going to select everything from that. Now, typically you won't select star from your time series data because you'll get back way too much data. But since this is just, and you'll typically you'll want to time box it. But since this is just demo data, I don't have to. Now I've tried the demo out before, so I know there's already data in there. So when I run it, what happened here? Okay, so I said what my SQL is. The client queried it for me. The client brought back here this reader object. So what is the reader object? Reader, this is an arrow reader. So this is, if you're not familiar with Arrow, Arrow is like a high performance computing library that lets you do computation on really large data sets and lets you do data analysis on really large data sets. And so it brings back that arrow reader, but then what I'm doing is just converting it to pandas. And then I'm not really doing anything with the pandas and just turning it into Markdown. And then you can see here all the queries that I made. So nice. All right. So notice how simple that is. One function to create the client, one function to write, one function to read. And then I can do whatever I want with the data after it's been read. We have an experimental thing in here, which is called write CSV. So I've already run this, obviously. I can run again. This is reading from this CSV file. It's making a CSV table. You can also make just line protocol and read in line protocol, etc. So actually would like to talk to people in the community. We think we probably want to just fold this into the existing write function and make it, the write function be able to handle different kinds of writes, just to keep things simple. But love to hear from you about whether you think that's a good design or whether it'd be better just to have multiple write functions like that. And then here I'm just doing the same thing, but I'm just querying from that CSV table that I wrote. See here, I call it CSV table, same query, and done. Okay, so that is my quick demo of the client libraries, but there is more. In the same repo, and we think we're going to separate it out. So right now, there's one Git repository that has both the client library code and the CLI code. And we think we're going to probably separate those into different repositories for different reasons and just make one depend on the other. But again, would love to hear from the community about how they think we could handle that, and also if there's any experienced Git geniuses out there, would love to get your help on that. So the way it works now is wherever you run the CLI from, it'll look locally, just like in that same directory for a config file, which we understand is not ideal, right? So what we really need to do is add the code to have a default location and all that stuff. That's just a matter of work that we haven't done. Would be a really nice contribution if someone already knows how to do that in Python. But you can also create a config on the fly. So if you pass in all your config information into the InfluxDB. So InfluxDB is the CLI command. If you use the config command and pass in the information, that'll actually write out a config file for you. Once again, note that if you're running in Cloud Serverless, where it says bucket, use the word, that's your database. So bucket is database. Okay. Oh, so now it's demo time. So the first thing I can do here is I can just do a read directly from the command line. Boom, how simple is that? Now notice here what the command is. It's influx3 SQL select. And you may be wondering, Rick, why isn't that called query? Shouldn't that be called query? The reason call it SQL is because InfluxDB version 3 dedicated already supports InfluxQL, and very soon serverless will also support InfluxQL. So you'll be able to pass either SQL or InfluxQL here. So we made this explicit use, say either SQL or InfluxQL to do your to select your language. Now we could have a language flag or something like that. Again, we can talk about that with the community, see what people prefer there. But right now, I'm just making it explicit. You just say SQL. Okay, you can also write from the command line. Oops, sorry. So let's do a little write from the command line. So here, why don't I do something that's not in there already? All right, so I just did a write, and now I can query that back out, and you can see it's readable already. It added that. It added that for us there. Okay, now where are we going here? Okay, so keep going. Okay, now there's also an interactive mode. So let's see the interactive mode. If I go to InfluxDB, it'll enter this interactive mode, and I can ask it for help. And you can see there's two commands that I can use. One is SQL, one is write. So we can go in the SQL mode, and then let's select star from demo measurement. Then I can just hit the arrow, up arrow again, and maybe I just want to say select F1 time. maybe I want to say, let's get the last one, etc. So you can see like a nice interactive mode where you can experiment with your SQL queries. I'm going to hit Control D, which will actually exit me out of the SQL mode. And I can enter write mode. So I'll go into write here. And then now I can just say write demo measurement. And then let's say F0 equals 6. F1 equals 6. So just know it's new. You want, oops, what did I do wrong? No fields. Sorry. What I did was I put the write in. So I thought that the measurement name that I wanted to write, and then anyway, so then I was just like really badly formed. So okay, so now I'm gonna hit Control D again. Now that I've used the correct line protocol syntax, I'll go back to SQL. Now actually I can up arrow here, get my last read, and boom. Okay, so call to action time. So what I'm saying is like, hey, if like you are a Python developer and you're interested in using InfluxDB 3.0 with Python, go up to the Git repository, install these tools, try them out. Remember that this is like really community project. We really want participation. We'll be really active helping people onboard into the community, so you can just like log issues, make PRs, and etc. So yep, I think we're all done. So I think I'm just gonna stop my screen.
And it looks like we only have one question, which I briefly answered, but I don't know if you want to add more to. Jose asks, I usually have to load signal data into Influx from multiple databases where clients have it stored as time series data in raw or DBS. Excuse me. Is there any new ways to upload the data directly into 3.0? And then second question, Zayad asks, what will happen to the Flight SQL library?
Okay, I can answer both of those. So the first question is, right now, we support the V1 and V2 write APIs. So there's no new V3 API yet. Please let us know what you have in mind, like what would be helpful, so we can add it, discuss it as we're doing our roadmap planning. We are, in early stages of trying to decide whether and how we should extend the write capabilities. So yeah, please give us that input. The second question was about the Flight SQL.
Correct. They're just asking what will happen to the Flight SQL library.
So nothing will happen to the Flight SQL library. So the Flight SQL library is really important for ORMs, for object relational mappers. So for instance, if you're a superset user, Superset uses the Flight SQL library to populate the builder and everything. So what Flight SQL is like a more a general interface into a SQL library that can tell metadata things. Like these are the databases, these are the tables in the database, these are the columns in the tables. And that whole API is not implementation specific. And so that allows people to write tools on top of it, which are not implementation specific. In other words, don't depend on the specific implementation of one specific database. They can use any database. So the Flight SQL library is super strategic and important for the whole Arrow community. So that's gonna stay there. The other thing that we're working on that might be of interest to whoever's asking is JDBC Flight SQL support. So that is an existing driver upstream. We're working hard to support it on the back end. That means any tool that you use that uses JDBC will then be able to also query InfluxDB as well. So that'll bring like Tableau integration, that'll bring Power BI integration, a whole bunch of other stuff. Any other questions on ACE?
Sorry, that looks like everything right now.
That's great. Okay. Hey, thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed getting to show this project that we're working on. And I'm Rick Spencer 3 in the community Slack. If anyone has any questions, they can just ask me directly.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.